Welcome back, chaps, and moving swiftly along, as we say. So, following from the last video where we completed the undercarriage assemblies, I've taken just a moment to prep everything for painting, and this is pretty much what I like to do for all the models I build. I need to get sub-assemblies, figure out how far I need to go in assemblies, and then get paint on. Now, the big point we've gotten to is that we need to think about obviously painting the engines, the interior of the engine cowling or the engine nacelle. We need to paint the undercarriage assemblies. We also need to paint the wheel well housings here. And then we've got some other sundries here. We've got the props. Just made them up exactly out of the instructions. We've got the main wheel assemblies. All I've done is drilled a little hole in the flat, just big enough to take the point of a cocktail stick, and we just stick it in there just to aid holding them. We've got the tail wheel assembly. Again, that's just cleaned up and then stuck into the top of a cocktail stick with a little bit of white glue. Same with the bomb racks, and same with the bombs. Again, they have a hole in them anyway, so just glued them, cleaned them up, and put a cocktail stick in their attachment hole. The engines, all I've done is taken a drill and drilled a small hole in the rear, just a shallow hole in the rear, and then with a corresponding cocktail stick, after I've taken the end off it, I've just put a little drop of super glue on there just to glue that stick in there whilst we handle the engine, and then it'll just snap away when we come to glue it onto the aircraft itself. And the same with these engine cowlings. All I've done is flatten the side of a cocktail stick, put a minimal amount of super glue on it, and glued that stick to the wall. It'll snap away from the interior wall, and we'll be able to touch in the unpainted area very easily. And to be honest, you won't see this anyway once it's actually on the aircraft. Once the engine's in there, you can't see it. So that's prepped all those parts. I've just cut this out of the frame. I'm going to leave it on the sprue. So we've got the flaps here, and we've got the ailerons that will go onto the wing once we've got the wing together, and then we've got the exterior bomb bay doors. It'll be easier just to paint them on here when we cut them off, then just touch in where the sprue points were and blend it in. Right, wheel wells we saw, all made up, and then we've got the horizontal surfaces here and the vertical stabilizer here, and there's obviously the wing tops. And then if we look at the main fuselage, that's fully dried up now. Cockpit's ready to go. I've just popped the rear gun position in there for now. It'll probably come out when I come to paint it, and you can see where I've done a little bit of seam filling here, restored the panel lines, and same on the top, just a little bit of seam filling. It went together really well. These are the fillets we put in here at the back. Again, a little bit of seam filling, and the black marks you're seeing, that is just a bit of I think German grey I used to check the seams, and it acts as a very fine filler in some of these fine scratches we left from sanding. So although it looks pretty unsightly, it's actually as smooth as you can get it. And a really nice, there's something really tactile about this aircraft, or the way Airfix have made it. It's just really nice to hold on to. It's got a bit of heft to it, it's a bit of weight, but it feels very sturdy. And the detail in the cockpit I really, really like. I mean, I'm absolutely stoked the way it's come out. The decal for the instrument panel. Just generally the level of detail in this kit is absolutely fantastic, and it's not a hugely expensive kit, so really, really good value for money. Right, so what next, I hear you say? Well, what next is we need to get out here and we need to paint. Now, I've been struggling a little bit with the paint for the wheel wells. If we look initially, the instructions call out for interior green, and then later on in the instructions it's calling out for silver. So it's not very clear, I have to say. So I'm going to take an executive decision and obviously everything's going to get black primer to start with. I'll get some satin black and everything will get a coat of that. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to paint the wheel well interior interior cockpit green. Right or wrong, I can't really find any photographs of up into the wing. All I can see is other modelers' builds, and most modelers seem to be plumping for interior green on the wheel wells. The undercarriage, however, I think we need to go in a similar way that Airfix have called out. So obviously, if I get a pointer, the wing spars will need to be interior green. Shouldn't be too much of a problem. The main oleo legs, I believe, will be silver, and then there'll be some of the green parts painted in here. But first off, we need to spray it all black, and then we'll just have to come in here with some very delicate brush painting. And like I say, with this will be interior green, that will be interior green, and that bit, and the rest of it we'll just see from there. Some modelers have plumped for painting the whole lot interior green. I don't know if that's correct. There is a picture of, I believe, a Mk1 Blenheim, and this is shown as aluminium, which is what the Airfix call out is. So we'll just have to give it a go and see. The main thing is you've seen how I like to lay out my parts ready for painting. So I'm going to charge up the airbrush. I'll find out my satin black. We'll charge up the airbrush with the color, and then we'll actually get to painting all these parts. Now, you've all seen me painting solid colors before now, so I'll probably do that off camera, and then we'll get to the interesting part where we paint the detailed colors. So the details will be obviously for the engine, for the wheel wells, and for the interior of the engine cowlings, and we'll focus on that and how we're going to get that done. And then once we've got that done, the next step is going to be actually putting all these main subsections together and getting the aircraft really well built. And then we'll also look at getting the canopies sorted out. So we are moving along. It's taken me a little bit longer than I thought, but you know, I'm trying to cover this in detail for everyone to see, so we don't miss anything. But we are getting to that point where we'll be moving ahead quickly. So enough waffling. I'll get the satin black color on, and we'll come back and ready to look at the detail painting. Right, welcome back. So following on from priming, everything's now primed with matte black, and I've got the airbrush charged up. So I'm using a Gallery Premium Mobius 0.3, which is ideal for acrylic paints, and we're using Tamiya's XF71 interior cockpit green. So we can come in and we can start highlighting the centers of the panels. There we go, and then we just want to gently spray in now. Just a blend coat. Make sure we try and leave a little bit of definition in there, that tonal variation. So you can hopefully see there. There's a little bit of tonal variation. We've picked out the highlights, and we've built in a little bit of shadow around either side of the ribs. So same again on this one. So just come in here and just focus in the middle of each panel. And then run along the edge, trailing edge. and then just gently spraying. You're spraying into the trailing edge spar. And then just a little bit of a blend coat over the top. And there you go. Perfect amount of colour and tonal variation, depth of shadow. Right, for the wheel well or engine nacelle assembly top, we can do a similar thing. We can just focus down the centre here. And then we just want to just draw that line in there, but diffuse it to the front and sharpen it to the back. Same with this side, so just diffuse it and then bring it into a straight line, following the contour of the engine nacelle. And then just come in, blend coat over the top, and we're talking a very thin coat. That's it. No more. So we've got the colour and we've got that tonal variation. Show you again. So definition in the middle, and here, like so, and then we want to come in here and just so get that, follow that contour of the round, so diffuse it front, follow it to the back. And then blend it in. And that's it. Now realistically, you're not going to see very much of that, but when we put a little wash on that, it should show the detail up quite nicely. Right, undercarriage lower. Interesting one. I don't know just how much of this we're going to see, but just blow the paint in from the top, so it'll be from the bottom really. And then just gently blend it in. If you want, you can do a bit of panel highlighting. I don't think it's very necessary, to be honest with you. You're really not going to see any of this, but we know it's painted, so we're happy with the level of detail we've got in here. So that's those bits painted. Right. I suppose the next things we need to think about is the wheel undercarriage assembly. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. If I can get the camera to zoom in, there we go, not too far. That's better. Right. So we know for a start that this rear bulkhead needs to be cockpit green. If you want to be a little bit more precise, then just take off the crown cap cover. So not only will that give you better vision of where the needle is, but it won't diffuse the paint as much. As the paint leaves the crown cap, then the vortex it creates obviously helps disperse the paint colour. Right, so that one's painted, and then this one as well. Hopefully you can see this with my lumbering hands, not getting in the way too much. Right, so now we need to paint the center one, and this is the best thing about airbrushes, because you can control the paint. You're almost, and you're laying the paint down with the airflow. But you can actually get the paint into places where it would be more difficult with a brush. And you're still reasonably well controlled. And the actual quantity of paint you're putting down is minuscule. But you don't need much, you just need that suggestion of colour. We are going to put a wash over this, so all the detail will be picked out. Right, so there's the three colours. Now what we need to do is check the instructions for the undercarriage, and we'll see what colour callouts we've got. So 78 is, or 85 is the cockpit satin black. So it's saying this centre section is satin black, and this piece is satin black. This piece is aluminium. The bulkheads we've decided are cockpit green. This is aluminium, the jack, and the main oleos are aluminium. Yeah. So what we need to do now, so I'll just put this airbrush away, because I think we'll finish the rest of this with brush. I'll do this one on camera and I'll complete the other one off camera, but I mean it'll be exactly the same paint process. So what we're looking at is this here being satin black, which it predominantly is now because obviously we've painted it black. So we just need to touch up this area here and tidy up here. This piece is silver, which in all fairness is going to be a challenge, but this is also silver here. And then the front oleo pieces here. Actually looking at the instructions, they've got different shading on. I just think a lot of this is going to be silver. Let's have a look. So we look here, that's dark there. But that bit there is light grey. Interesting. Right, well, so what we can do is we can focus on, we'll get this black in first, and then we'll come in with a paintbrush and we'll paint these silver areas. So for the black, just using, I know this says Tamiya X1, but it's actually gloss black with some X21 flat base in it to make it a satin. It's probably one of the best satin blacks I can get. This Tamiya gloss black is absolutely lovely. Put some flat base in it, that turns a beautiful satin black. So we can get back in here, we can tidy up all these areas that we got a little bit of green on. It's quite simple. Like I say, realistically, nobody's going to see this. But, being modelers, we know we've got it right. And then we just tidy up here. So it doesn't take much. A few deft strokes with the old paintbrush. We've touched back in the very minimal green overspray. Okay, so now what I want you to think about is the silver and what silver we're going to use. And I have a few silvers. I'll be quite honest with you, the Tamiya silvers tend to have quite a heavy pigment. I have Mr. Hobby buffables, but they're lacquers. So they're pretty hot and they don't stop giving off pigment. You buff them and you can buff them and you can better buff them. They're beautiful paints, but unless you seal them with a gloss varnish or a semi-gloss varnish, then they're just going to keep burnishing and dropping paint particles everywhere. So what am I using? I'm using I think it's Citadel Rufang, or the old sort of mithril silver type paint. Now, it's a really, really nice pigment in paint, and it goes over black beautifully. This pot has been quite well thinned, so I can use it straight out of the pot. So all this lower oleo assembly is going to be silver. This screw jack is going to be silver. And this paint covers beautifully. It really does cover beautifully, and this is where brush painting still has a part in the hobby, in my opinion, because it can deliver paint to where you want it accurately. Use a nice fine brush and well mixed paint, and it's just as quick as airbrushing. And Citadel paints, especially their metallic paints, they're beautiful paints, they really are. Highly recommend them. Not only do they thin with water, they also thin with Tamiya X20A, and they last for ages. They're also very readily available from most good hobby retailers, which is a plus point. There's nothing worse than finding a paint you like and then you can't get it anymore, it's out of stock. Don't really have that problem with the Citadel paints. So the main thing now is just to work your way around here steadily and concisely, and making sure we're covering up all the black on the parts we need to paint. And as you go around the parts, then any areas you've missed soon show up. You can easily touch them in. And of all the parts we're painting, these are the parts we're going to see the most once the model is complete. Not forgetting that we're going to put a wash on them yet. And that will really make the detail on these parts pop. And I have to say, I'm so impressed with this kit from Airfix. The level of detail and the quality of moulding is really, really up there with some of the A-class model companies. And if you look at some of Airfix's recent releases, certainly picked up that game over these last few years. They really are giving modelers fantastic kits to build. Some unusual subjects, some really, really anticipated subjects. You know, you've got things like your Fairy Gannet, classic of the Fleet Air Arm, Hawker Siddeley Buccaneer, Classic Cold War strike bomber. And obviously most recently the Seppicat Jaguar, of which I haven't got that kit yet, but I am certainly going to be picking one up because it looks like a fantastic model. Of course, those are all in 1/48 scale, which is my preferred scale of building. And you've also got things like the Avro Vulcan in 72nd scale, Handley Page Victor tanker and bomber. You know, classic icons of the V-Force. The Valiant, if you can find it. Beautiful, beautiful aircraft. A couple of years ago I was lucky enough to go to East Fortune, just south of Edinburgh, museum there, and had a look at their Vulcan bomber, which actually is the subject of the Black Buck boxing of Airfix's Vulcan. And you get a real impression of the sheer size and intimidation factor of that aircraft. It's huge. Another kit I don't have in my stash, but one of these days I really do feel like I could spend a lot of time building Airfix kits at the moment. And I have to say the experience I'm having so far with the Blenheim is very pleasant. Bristol Aircraft Company built some iconic aircraft. None more so than the successor to this aircraft, the Bristol Beaufighter. And I think the Beaufighter has to be my all-time favourite Royal Air Force strike aircraft for World War II. Even over and above a de Havilland Mosquito. But if you think of that, I've built both the Tamiya and the Revell Beaufighters, and I have to say the quality of this build Airfix pulled together is definitely on a par with those kits. 100% on a par with those kits. So top marks to Airfix. Right, now the observant amongst you would have noted whilst I've been talking I've made a few bloopers with painting, but that doesn't matter. That is the joys of brush painting. Sometimes when you're painting a complete assembly, then you do make mistakes. However, it's satin black is all we need to touch it in, and they're in a place that it can easily get to. So we'll let that cure up. But that actually looks fantastic. Really, really nice bit of kit. The only other thing this needs is a drop of oil, well, non-oil, like a acrylic wash. And the hubs themselves, they're silver too. And these, again, what I tend to do with wheels is, although I've primed it in black, I will come back in with a anthracite type dark grey for the rubber. So any little mistakes I make with the silver will be easily touched in. But you can see this silver paints really rather nicely. Just go both ways with the brush so you get all the nooks and crannies filled. This side's easier because there's no no spokes on the wheels. So you just come in, a nice circular action. And just let the tip of the brush sit in the wheel rim. It's very well defined. Go both ways. And then go and do the interior. And to be fair, if you want, you can mask. I find brush painting wheels quite therapeutic. It's not difficult. And you can usually get quite a good job. And it's a whole lot faster than masking up and then unmasking. So what I do need to do is check a reference photo just to see how big the wheels are. So if you just bear with me a minute. Yeah, they're quite small. So it looks like I have got, pretty much got all the rim. Just here. There, missed a bit. That's all the rim painted, both sides. So once that's dry, we'll actually come back in with anthracite grey to paint that. Right, engines. I have a feeling the engines will be all aluminium colour, and we can use this colour for it. Just try and find myself a reference photograph. Should have done this beforehand. So, yeah, the engines do appear to be quite a dirty colour. So these push rods are black, they're gloss black, and the reduction gearbox in the centre boss is black. So there's actually not a lot of silver that you're going to see. The silver bits are the cylinders. So they're in here. So we just need to come in here and do some dry brushing. So these bits need to be silver here, the cylinders. Obviously it's an air-cooled radial. And then the bit of block here, the cylinder's attached to. This is your basic dry brushing basically. And Citadel paints are excellent for dry brushing. They do tend to last quite a while on the brush. So we should be able to get this engine painted with what paint we have. If you need to load the brush up again, that's no problem. Just on your glove, paint. Just get rid of the excess paint so you're not, you're dry brushing and not painting. Yeah, it's quite tight in here. Getting that splash of silver colour really does make the engines pop. So we come back in with a touch of gloss black, tidy up the rest of this engine's, then that will really start to bring the detail alive. Right, so that's the bulk of the silver paint done. We do need to give the back of the engine a quick going over. Again, just dry brushing, just to get a hint of colour going on there. So this is your inlet side, so it's your cooler side. We'll put a wash on there to help the dry brushing, just to get that bit of detail there on the back. If you wanted, you could have used the flatter brush to do this, but this little round brush is doing all right. If you need to load it up, reload it, and then just take and paint it on your glove, and then you can get the paint worked off it. It's just back to dry brushing. Or if you want to just lay down a bit more paint, just leave a little bit more paint on the brush. Citadel paints are very, very versatile like this. You can see that it is picking out the highlights of the raised detail, and it will give us something to look at if we have to take a moment to look at the rear of the engine. That's looking nice. Again, we'll just give the heads a once over. And I'm not even too worried about the fact that some of these cooling, or this metal plate in here between each cylinders, has got a bit of highlighting on it with silver. In reality, they'll probably get a bit of a pasting during the war, and they'll be chipped anyway, so we'll rely on the wash dampening them back. But what we do need to do now is come in with a gloss black and paint all these push rods and this center boss area here. What we can do, just briefly, is just come in here and just, that's maybe not going to work as I thought it would, because the bolt heads, looking at the picture, the bolt heads here are quite prominent, but I think that's just overcooking it. So let me dig out some gloss black. And I should have some reasonably to hand. He said optimistically. There we go. X1 gloss black. Let me clean the brush. And drop the brush. Fantastic. I'm hoping this isn't too dull and boring, but this is pretty much how I paint stuff. Try and move it reasonably quickly, accurately, so you end up with a good result. Right, Tamiya gloss black. This pot has been pre-thinned. It goes down beautifully. And having that gloss juxtaposed to the silver will just add that extra level of detail. In reality, we're probably not going to see much of this when this engine gets put in the cowling. If we make an effort and try our best, then there's always a chance that you'll get a chance at seeing some of this. What we will need to do is be reasonably careful when we come in with a wash. We'll just try and keep it to the cylinders and avoid the gloss areas, because we don't want to lose that variation between the flat metal surfaces and the glossy black. We'll try and keep that gloss just to add the contrast. It's all about the contrast that gives the detail the eye looks into. You could, of course, if you really wanted to, paint this all separately and then bring it all together. It would probably make it a little bit easier. However, I prefer just to try and get sub-assemblies and just work away at it. Doesn't take very long to do either. And if you do paint with a brush, then it's another skill. And this hobby is all about building and maintaining skill sets. Right, just take a moment to step back and check your work. Never be frightened to hold the work further away from your field of vision, just to check to see that you've got everywhere. The human eye is an amazing organ to pick up detail. Yeah, quite happy with that. So hopefully you can see that there. We've now got a degree of detail in there. And let that cure up. And once it's cured up, I'm going to just put a little bit of wash just in and around the cylinders, avoiding any of this glossed area. Now, once we've got the black on the brush, I'll just go back to the satin black and we'll touch in the areas that we overpainted. when we're doing the undercarriage. And it covers beautifully, the Tamiya paint, it really does. The gloss paints are lovely. We're just pretty much there. Like I say, in realism we're probably not going to see any of this because it's all going to be tucked up inside the aircraft. However, we know it's there. Oh yeah, that two parts there. I don't know how much this camera is picking up. I did try and zoom in, but you might not be able to see where I'm painting. So I do apologise if I'm talking a lot and you're not seeing much. Just trying to describe how I do things. And there's always a multitude of different ways to do stuff. And I encourage you to try every single one of them. Well, not every single one, but definitely try more than one way of doing something, because you might find that you actually prefer doing it a different way. So never stop learning. Right, there we go. We've now touched in those parts. So it's looking quite nice. So next, I've got to paint the interior green in here. So I'll do that. We've also got to think about colours for this. And it looks like a very heavily burnt stainless steel colour. So I'm going to have to ponder how we're going to do that, because burnt iron's probably not going to cut it. It's almost a bronzy colour with a heat stain under the stainless. So we'll have a ponder of that, but the main thing to do is to get the cockpit green on the interior. I'm also going to need to get in with the silver, so I've got the other wheel well, the undercarriage to paint, and we've got the wheel to paint and the other engine to paint. So I'm going to clean this brush off, mix up the silver again, and I'm going to get all the silver work done, and then we'll come back once we've done that to look at putting on washes and then actually putting the undercarriage in the wings and get the wings closed. So yeah, very close to moving on quite quickly. So we'll see you back in a moment.